Welcome to the People's Maps virtual informational hearing. The hearing will now begin. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. This evening's hearing includes informational testimony by Professor Moon Duchin of the MGGG Redistricting Lab. As a reminder, due to the unfortunate increasing spread of COVID-19, this is a virtual hearing with many participants from around the state and nation, and technology can be fickle even under the best of circumstances. We appreciate in advance the patience and understanding of viewers, as well as the presenters and commissioners, should there be any technical challenges this evening. With that, we will now hand it over to Commission Chair Chris Ford to call the hearing to order.
Thank you. And good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this informational hearing of the People's Maps Commission to order now. And I want to welcome everybody to the People's Maps Commission informational hearing about our draft maps. We are all very excited. We're all very excited to release our draft maps. The rest of the commission and I have all worked very tirelessly combing through submissions of COI data, maps that have been submitted, testimony collected throughout this process. Tomorrow will mark our 1-year mark since we began this journey together and how far we've come. We thank you all for all these submissions and your past and continued support of this commission and this very important work. We want to note, although these maps will be released tonight for you to view, it's important to note that these maps are not the final maps. More changes will come after tonight's meeting. And even though we aren't done, we think that it's time to show our work at this point in time. It's been a long road, as I said before, to get here. We've heard from over 1,800 Wisconsinites in 68 counties from over 321 municipalities, notably over 800 communities of interest as well. But we aren't done yet. You'll still be able to comment on these draft maps for another week now. You may go to the portal to view these maps, and comments for the maps will close October 7th at 11:59 p.m. But before we get into any of that, we'll need to tell you about the maps themselves. And so with that being said, we'll go ahead and start our roll call here. So commissioners, if when I call your name, feel free to say here and tell us a little bit about yourself as we would normally do in our hearings. So bringing back good memories. So Commissioner Tobias from the 1st Congressional District.
Present. And good evening, Chair Ford, and good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Tobias, and I live and work in the city of Racine here in Congressional District number 1. I'm incredibly excited this evening about sharing our draft maps. The commission has worked, as Chair Ford had stated, incredibly hard, and I'm really, really proud of the work that we have all done and what we've accomplished. I'm very confident that, when people begin to send feedback on what they feel about our draft maps, that we will address the areas of concerns as best we can and continue to make improvements. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Tobias. And from the 2nd Congressional District, Commissioner Ruben Anthony.
Good evening, and thank you for being here tonight. I'm Ruben Anthony. I'm the president and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Madison. And first, I'd like to congratulate my colleagues and thank them for the hard work that they all have put in to make these maps available. As Commissioner Ford has mentioned, this is not the last time that you will have an opportunity to provide input into the map. So we look forward to continue to hear from you for about another week or so. Just glad to be a part of this work. And Chairman Ford, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Commissioner Anthony. Going to the 3rd Congressional District, we'll hear from Commissioner Anne-Marie McClellan.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Chair Ford. I'm Anne-Marie McClellan from the 3rd CD, resident of Menominee, Wisconsin. And I thank everybody who's listening in today. And I would like them to know that we really did a lot of work preparing for this day. We listened to the redistricting experts. We followed the redistricting laws. We listened to the public who told us to create compact districts that avoid splitting counties and municipalities and communities of interest. And we heard criticisms of the current district plans. The PMC used this information to create our mapping criteria that was published back in April. And these criteria has served as our guide to establish district maps that we feel are free of partisan bias and reflect the public's concerns that we heard. So we look forward to hearing constructive comments on the draft maps we present today. And thank you all for your continued interest in the PMC.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner McClellan. From the 4th Congressional District, we'll hear from my Congressional District twin, Benjamin Ringale.
Thanks, Chair Ford. Yes, long time coming. It was kind of wild that you had said a year we've been together, and it's been a lot of work, and I'm really grateful to have been a part of the commission. I'm excited to present our work. Thankful and grateful for all the other commissioners here on the People's Maps Commission. Thankful for Chair Ford and your leadership. Special shout out to those commissioners who have worked on the line drawing subcommittee and all the extra work beyond, beyond our scheduled time that you all have spent. And everyone who's had a part of this process, in particular the public. I mean, over the course of the year, as many have already pointed out, we have heard time and time again that we want, the people of Wisconsin want a fair, nonpartisan process for the drawing of these districts. And we hope that the commission hopes, I hope that we have presented a process that can at least demonstrate what it's like to be transparent, open, and take into account the interests and needs of the people of Wisconsin and every single county throughout the entire state. And so tremendously grateful for the work we have done so far and those who have contributed to it. And excited to hear from the public some more about what they think of our maps. And hopefully we can come up with the best possible product. And so thanks, Chair Ford, again, and looking forward to things.
Thanks, Commissioner Ringale. And from the 5th Congressional District, Commissioner Susan Ramp.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Susan Rampt. I'm in the 5th District. I live in Wauwatosa, and I am a HR leader for Manpower Group in Milwaukee. To echo my fellow commissioners, really grateful to have come to this point now. And this is my first time working on such a commission, and it has been a really enlightening experience. First of all, to learn from all of you, and mostly from the public. This has been consistently a transparent process, very inclusive and nonpartisan. And it has been from day one for every single meeting and every single communication that we've had. And to come to this point and be able to share the output of that today is something I'm quite proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ramp. And from the 6th CD, Commissioner Melissa Prentice.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Chair Ford. I'm Melissa Prentice. I live and work in the city of Sheboygan. I am a librarian and library manager, and I'm really excited to have reached this 1-year mark and be presenting you all with our draft maps. And really just to reiterate what my fellow commissioners have said, I just wanted to particularly thank the people of Wisconsin for engaging with us over this last year. Consistently showing up for the hearings, sharing their feedback, giving us their communities of interest. Just it's been really a positive experience, and I do hope that that the public is pleased with our draft maps, and also a big thank you to the fellow commissioners for all of your hard work. It's been a really rewarding process, and I'm really proud of the work that we've done.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Prentice. From the 7th Congressional District, Commissioner Jason Bissonette.
Hey, good evening, Chair Ford. Thank you. And my fellow commissioners. Before I get started, I need to point out, well, I'm calling from the Great North Woods in the 7th Congressional. And as I mentioned before, the 7th Congressional, we've got Cranberry Fest going on this weekend. And we have Apple Fest in Bayfield this weekend. So if anyone's bored, we'll be at a fest. But I just want to mention that, this entire experience has been just phenomenal. I think about, I want to thank the people of Wisconsin, but I also look at the other commissioners who represent the congressional districts. And I really feel like we make up the best, like a broad spectrum of what Wisconsin is, which is pretty exciting. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be a part of rolling out these draft maps tonight. I mean, the amount of work the other commissioners have put in, I can't even really quantify. I admire the other commissioners, the amount of work that's been poured into it. And moving forward, I look forward to the next few days and just hearing all the really constructive thought on these draft maps. And I just want everyone to know who's listening, just the amount of care and effort that's been put in place, and knowing that we are humans and things get flawed, and it's just, I guess that's the beauty of it, that we can come together, gather information, and do the best we can. So thank you, Chair Ford. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner Bissonette. And from the 8th CD, Commissioner Anthony Phillips.
Thank you, Chair Ford. I'm zooming in from Appleton, and it's been a real honor over the last year to represent Appleton and the surrounding area and all of the 8th Congressional District. I've heard from so many people in this region. I would just echo what others have said about the unbiased and very nonpartisan approach that we have taken from day one and will continue to take. I want to say thanks to all the people who have submitted comments. I want to send a special shout out to our young mapper, recent graduate from UW-Eau Claire, Wyatt Patchtash, who has spent now countless hours already since mid-August mapping, and will spend more hours, so thank you specifically. As a semi-retired physician, I would tell you that if these maps were enacted or similar maps were enacted, it would just be extremely healthy for Wisconsin. And I'll leave it at that. So thank you again, and I'm very excited to hear the map presentation.
Absolutely, thank you, Commissioner Phillips. And I'm Chris Ford, the chairman of the PMC from the 4th Congressional District, and I'm an emergency medicine physician. I just wanted to take the time to thank everyone from this commission. You guys have been outstanding throughout this entire process. This has been an unprecedented process that initially was started back in October of last year. Tomorrow will be our 1-year mark, as Ben was saying. And, we essentially conformed this to an in-person setting even before we were all selected as to be in person in each congressional district, and then converted that to a virtual setting, and then added on a few more months on either end, right? And so we've done this entirely virtually, and even still, I feel as though I've learned a great deal and a great amount from each and every one of you. We're looking forward to finalizing these maps over the next few weeks, and particularly ensuring VRA compliance as well as we continue along this process. And I would be remiss if I did not thank my mother-in-law and my wife as well for putting up with late night mapping and late night phone calls regarding the commission too. So thank you to both of them as well. And so with that being said, we'll go ahead and we'll introduce Moon Duchin. For anyone who is new to our proceedings, I would like to reintroduce Moon here. So Moon Duchin is an associate professor at Tufts University. She is the creator and author of the district software that we have been utilizing at the very end of this process here that we've been doing. And so Moon currently heads up the MGGG lab, or MGGG lab is why it likes to call it. Moon has done a significant amount of research on the mathematics of redistricting as well as gerrymandering, and has founded the MGGG lab to advance these mathematical studies and their nonpartisan application in the real world of US politics. And so with that being said, Moon, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you. I am so excited to tell you a little bit about how these maps look from an analytical math modeling point of view. So I'll say just a couple quick words about process for those listening, and then I'll get right into some analysis of maps. So the process here has been a really interesting, as you all have emphasized, a really transparent one. And it's one in which you all came together, you deliberated about the criteria. My lab has been working with you for months as your data support team. So we tried to give you the sort of numbers and the images and the kind of richer information that help you take your ideas about the criteria and think about what metrics might operationalize them. And then we measure your plans by those metrics. Another thing that we've done in the process is generated automatically by algorithm, have generated many thousands and millions of alternative maps and presented some to you, again, transparently and publicly, just as starting points. What's been really gratifying for us to see is how you've taken those starting points and you just had you've taken them and you've run with them. So by looking at the community of interest, testimony that you received on your public portal, and by your own local knowledge of Wisconsin and its community structure, you took those computer maps and turned them into human maps. And that's what's so exciting about this process. So you all sat down with Wyatt, your tireless line drawer, and you took those original lines and you moved them around to better fit your understanding of what might serve the people of Wisconsin. And then today I'm going to tell you a little bit about those 9 draft maps. And I'm happy to take questions after I do an initial presentation. So let me share my screen and show you. Okay. Great. You see this full screen now? All right, looks good. So here, without further ado, are some PMC draft plans that you know very well because you have lovingly formed these lines. So what you see on the screen now is your 3 assembly plans. So 99 districts in Wisconsin Assembly. And here they are color-coded, your assembly map 1, 2, and 3. And then here we have your Senate maps 1, 2, and 3. Now in Wisconsin, you of course have a rule that says that assembly districts should nest 3 to 1 inside Senate districts. And so these are made by grouping the corresponding plans from the last slide. So you group 3 assembly districts in each to form the corresponding Senate plan. So these are nested. So you have 3 different nested alternatives that you're viewing. And then here are your congressional plans. Okay. So that's what they look like. But if you want to be, you know, a mathematician who looks at redistricting plans, it's not just how they look to the eye. There's a lot that you can quantify about them. So first I'm going to put up kind of just a big data table and talk about how this relates to the criteria that you all have established over the last few months. So one of the criteria that's important in your scheme is that counties, political boundaries, in particular counties, should be kept intact whenever possible. And so incidentally, I'll say all the stats that you see here are just a small slice of all the ones that we computed that can be computed. This is just to give a kind of cross section of how your plans interact with your framework of criteria. So you have the number of county splits and then the number of pieces that those counties are cut into. The next one, cut edges. This is a compactness score. And like with split counties, cut edges has the property that the lower the number is, the better, the more compact. In other words, the shapes tend to be nicer when the cut edges score is lower. I should mention that cut edges takes into account not only what are the building blocks of your plan, but how many districts you're being cut into. So you see that the congressional plans tend to have lower numbers of cut edges than the Senate plans or the Assembly plans, as you'd expect. The way to read that is to make comparisons within a type. So you should compare those congressional plans to each other, compare the Senate plans to each other, compare the Assembly plans to each other. In your criteria, you named as a goal that if all the higher ranked criteria can be satisfied equally well, among those plans that do so, you'd prefer plans that are more proportional. So here what we've done is tried to give you some statistics that take a look at that. And so what we did was we assembled a data set of 14 elections, and I'll show you on a following slide which 14 they are. 14 elections that actually took place in Wisconsin during the last 10-year cycle. And over the course of those 14 elections, you can look at how many seats go to each party. Okay, now your proportionality ideal says that each party's share of the votes should be about equal to its share of the seats. That's one way of thinking about partisan fairness, and that's the way that you, the People's Maps Commission, chose as your way of thinking about partisan fairness. And so across those 14 elections, Republicans, we just chose the Republican point of view for this slide, could just as easily have been the Democratic, but Republicans got 49.59% of the vote, of the major party vote across all those 14 elections together. And so the ideal, the proportional, the most perfect proportionality would be a map that also got close to that 49.59 mark. And then you can see here how many seats each map gets across those elections and what the party lean is across those elections. And something that you'll notice, you can't mistake this, is that despite the fact that Wisconsin is very close to 50-50 in terms of the votes, all of these maps have a little bit more of a lean towards Republicans. And this is due to the well-known fact that if you draw districts against the real political geography of most any American state, there's districts tend to confer a geographic advantage to Republicans who at this time in US history are more spread out across rural areas, while Democrats are a bit more concentrated. We'll take a little bit of a closer look at how that party difference plays out over the next few slides. So in the next two columns, you see the total seats over proportionality. So lower would be better. And then the following column is the absolute value of that difference. So it's sort of showing you, as you'll see on the following slides, just how much responsiveness, how much swing there is in the election. And that's, there's a column here with population deviation as well, which is of course an important federal requirement that you keep your districts well balanced. And at this point, I'll go on and show you some images, but I wanted to start with the data table that shows you kind of all the numbers of how these various plans stack up. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for me at this point? Okay, so let's take a visual look at the same information. Okay, so this is a kind of plot that in working with you all over the last few months, you came to see as fairly useful in understanding the notion of proportionality and the notion of responsiveness of the plans over time. So across the bottom, you see the 14 elections in the data set spanning all the way from the beginning of the last census cycle to close to the end. And the blue line in these plots is showing you the vote share in these elections. And you can see Wisconsin being as purple of a state as it is, that vote share hovers a little above and sometimes a little below 50%. Again, this is from the Republican point of view. The solid orange line is your currently enacted plan. And so what you see in this picture is if we take the current plan that's in place for the Wisconsin Assembly and we look at the actual pattern of how people voted election after election, how many seats would have had a Republican majority? Right, and so what you can see is that the orange line floats a certain distance above the blue line, except in one election, the Senate election of 2018. And what that's telling you is that it's got a consistent lean of several seats in, let's see, it looks like about typically 10 to 15 seats in favor of Republicans relative to proportionality, election after election. And the dotted plans are your own, the three assembly plans that you are proposing today. And so something that I think stands out from the picture is that your plans have the property of responsiveness. They rise and fall as the voting patterns of the electorate rise and fall. So instead of having a kind of consistent advantage for either side, they go up and down with the sea level. I like to call this a sea level plot. Okay, so that's what we're seeing here. And you can start to see distinctions among your plans, but they all have this kind of responsiveness property that they, unlike the enacted plan, they switch sides more often, giving you a delegation in the assembly that would change control from one party to the other over time. Okay, let's see the same thing for your Senate plans. So here they are, compared to the blue proportionality line and the orange line of the enacted plans. Here's how your Senate plans rise and fall over the course of all these actual observed election patterns of the last 10 years, right? And then finally, here are the congressional plans. So of course, since there are only 8 seats in Congress, these look a little bit chunkier. They rise and fall by 1/8 at a time. And you can see the way that they track up and down responsively as the voting pattern changes over time. Okay, so how does this respond to your criteria? Well, your criteria say, among maps that do a good job of satisfying all the higher ranked ones, so population balance, the Voting Rights Act, which as you've said, you're gonna layer in the weeks to come. Respect for communities of interest, which you've really taken seriously by using all the public input as well as your local knowledge to adjust the lines to match up with the community structure that you understand around the state. County integrity, town integrity, and so on. Among all those higher plans that satisfy well all those higher ranked criteria, what you're trying to do is find things that get closer to that blue line, but that do so in a manner that actually allows individual districts to change hands, a manner that's responsive to the vote. Okay, so the last type of visual that I'd like to show as an initial glimpse at this is to take a look at what that looks like on the level of individual districts. So these plots show you the districts in your assembly maps 1, 2, and 3. And each district is now colored by across the 14 elections in the data set. Did it go for the Republican every time? In that case, it gets a solid red color. Did it go for the Democratic candidate every time? In that case, it gets a solid blue color. Or does it sometimes have a Democratic lead and sometimes a Republican lead over the last 10 years in the course of all of these statewide elections in the data set? And so I think something that you can see that's quite interesting in these pictures is that the patterns look rather different. And by finding maps that are responsive, that rise and fall with the sea level, you're able to see some purple emerging. You don't only see safe seats for the two parties, but you see what I think most people mean when they talk about competitiveness. You see the ability of districts to be won by either party, right? So the map is actually able to respond to voters. Okay, so these are your assembly plans viewed that way. And I hope this is really interesting to see how the patterns across the state can be differently captured by different districting arrangements. Here's the same view for the Senate plans. And then finally, here's the same view for the congressional plans. Right, and so to my eye, what you've done is you've been able to find maps that don't always lock in advantage for one party or the other. And I know that over the weeks to come, you'll be examining these and looking for ways even to improve upon the ones that you've already got. Okay, so that concludes my first pass through looking at some of the properties that show us how your plans comport with your design principles, with your criteria that you've established. I will flip back now at this point to the summary table, because now that we've seen the pictures, I think we've sort of viewed everything that there is. Everything in this table has now been illustrated by some of the images that we've seen. And I'm happy to take questions from the commission, or at some point, if we have a chance, from the public, if we're taking questions on the course of this call.
Moon, this is Anne Marie. I have one question. Those last maps on responsiveness and showing the purple areas were quite informative and interesting to look at. Is there a way to quantify the purple, like get all those areas so that we have kind of a metric that is a little more solid than our eyeballs?
Sure, yeah, actually there's a few ways to do that, but let's see. I can show you one. So I should have mentioned all of the materials that I'm showing you in this slideshow are public and fully available. And I believe that the PMC's staff will be distributing them to the press and to the public so that folks can take a look. But I'll give you a quick glimpse of what that looks like. Let me show you an example. Okay, so for instance, here, I'll share my screen and show you. So here's an inside look at the districts in your Congressional 1 plan. And I have these for all the plans. So this shows by district. So 2 districts have 0 Republican wins, meaning across all the elections in the data set, they were always won by Democrats in your Congressional 1 plan. 2 districts were always won by Republicans, and the others can swing. So either they were won 13 out of 14 times, 9 out of 14 times, or 5 out of 14 times by Republicans. So this is showing you the districts that are really locked in to a partisan preference versus in this particular case, 2 districts that are usually Republican and 2 that are extremely swingy across the elections in the data set. And like I said, we can look at that for any of the other plans. So I'll show you, for example, one of the Senate plots. And feel free to ask me any individual one that you want to see, but I'll just arbitrarily choose Senate plan number 3. And that looks like this. So you can see this one has a certain, it has 10 seats that always go Democratic across the elections in this data set. It has, this looks like 11 or 12 seats that always go Republican, and then quite a few that swing. Some that swing, almost evenly to one party or the other, some that have a strong tendency, but not a lock. And this gives you kind of a look at the numbers behind those red and blue plots. So the ones in the middle here would show up as very purple in those plots versus the bright red and the bright blue. Does that help, Anne-Marie?
Yes, that does. That's helpful. Thank you.
Great.
Can we see that same thing, but for the assembly district that had, I think it was number 2. I don't have the table to reference in front of me, but it was the assembly district that had the lowest, that was closest to the ideal for that category. Sure.
So first, let me look at the comparison table and see the assembly district. Yeah, so your assembly 2 was the one that was closest in aggregate. And so let's take a look at the swing profile of assembly 2. Here it is. That's really quite remarkable. Assembly 2 has districts with every possible number in between 0 and 14. So it really runs the full color range from bright red to bright blue to all the purples in between.
Can you show the Senate one for that? The Senate 2, which derived from Assembly 2.
Sure, you bet.
Not quite as good proportionality, but if it's responsive, that would be important.
And I see that these were popular, so I should have put them in the main slideshow. All right, so here's Senate 2. Right, and then what's interesting is that the Senate plans that you formed from the assembly plans, you can make from any 3-to-1 grouping, right? And so you can play around for a fixed assembly plan with different ways to do that and see how these statistics respond.
Right, and then as a follow-up, would there be available these kind of plot maps for the currently enacted? I mean, I take it there'd be a lot less purple on the plot map and a lot less lines in the 2 sides, but are there any that you made for those?
Yes, let's see. So let's look, for instance, at the enacted assembly plan. And you can see so you can see that it's got over 40 districts that always go Republican. Looks like 32 that always go Democratic, 1 usually Democratic, and everything else is half the time or more going Republican. It's a rather different looking pattern.
It's extremely visual. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, any other questions on these quantitative views of your work? Okay, so from my point of view, I just want to congratulate you at this point. I know it's been a long road. I've been there with you. And I hope to be able to continue to support you by giving you the sort of numerical and visual tools to iterate through and deliberate through, round after round of generating maps, adjusting maps, and thinking about how to make them better and better. So thank you for entrusting us to help out with the view of these plans. I couldn't be more excited to be part of this very exciting process.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Moon. All right. And thank you to Moon for explaining the maps and to tell us how well they met our criteria at this point in time and showing those very visual, as Tony said, heat maps. Those are awesome. And again, I want to thank all the commissioners for their hard work on these maps thus far. As we can see from the metrics of it here, we've done some great work. But again, the work isn't completely done, not for us and not for the people of Wisconsin. And by that, I mean, we want more input. It's time for you all to check out our work and to give us that feedback that we have been requesting this entire time and have been utilizing to create these maps. So we offer everyone to go to portal.wisconsin-mapping.org to give your input. The maps will also be available on our website, which is govstatus.egov.com/people's maps. We tell people to, tell your family, tell your friends, organize a mappy hour, as some folks have been doing up to this point in time. Enjoy it old fashioned, spotted cow or craft IPA after you submit your thoughts. So we're counting on you guys, and we'll continue to pull from your input. And so with that being said, thank you to everybody here on this commission. Thank you to Moon. Thanks to Wyatt and everyone else. And we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Thank you. Thanks, Moon.
Bye.
Thank you, Ryan.